Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It is such a privilege for all of us on the clergy team to be with you in our beloved Gann Chapel. We are recording this on Thursday, May 2nd. It is 2 days after Pesach. You are watching this on the first Shabbat after Pesach, and we have a lot to talk about. Colleagues, I wanted to begin our conversation today with a little nugget that I had gotten from Daniel Hartman's last podcast before Pesach. He and Yossi Klein Alevi were talking about icebreakers, and Daniel suggested an icebreaker that was just so simple and so endlessly evocative. How are you? That was what he was going to ask the guests at his Seder table. Given what is going on in the world, given what is going on in the Jewish world, given what is going on in Newton and in our world, how are you? How is your neshama? How is your soul? When you wake up in the morning, how are you feeling about your day? How is your morale?
You're asking.
I'm asking. That is called a question.
Let's start on a cheery note. Terrible.
Terrible. Okay, tell us more or less.
I have trouble sleeping. I go at night to sleep, and I cannot think about any other thing than the Columbia campus or what's going on in Israel or what's going on in America, and I wake up the same.
You go to sleep troubled, and you wake up troubled. By the way, just give us a report on your wonderful son, Mikey. How is he, and where is he?
So Mike is doing well. He's home after the events on Tuesday morning. When students and some agitators took over Hamilton Hall at Columbia University, we decided with my wife that it wouldn't be good for him to return. So he's home. He has to see next week. He has all the finals. Out of 5 courses he's taking, 4 are already online, but there is a possibility that one at JTS will be in person. So we are still thinking about that. And but he seems to be fine, concentrating on the studies.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you. We love Mikey. Other colleagues, how are you feeling? How are you doing now?
Yeah, pretty much not different from Elias. It's it's really hard. Like every night, I make the mistake of looking at the news before I go to sleep, and then it's like another hour or two before I fall asleep. Like around 1 in the morning. It's just really heartbreaking. And for me, just to think that, like with Elias, thinking about your kids and thinking like they would not have to experience the kind of like anti-Semitism. I never ever thought that it would be so widespread and virulent and so accepted in this country as it is now. And it's just, to me, it's frightening, and it's heartbreaking.
Well, we are very happy little conversation this morning, but we got to talk. One thing I always, heard about any kind of public space, talk about what matters, talk about what's real, and this is what is real. Elisa, how you doing?
It's interesting. So today is on the Omer counting, Gevura Sheba Gevura, strength of strength or discipline of discipline, and I'm feeling in a different place. For me, this started during Passover. The awareness that anti-Semitism, that the intensity of the world is more similar to our ancestors than different, for me felt very strengthening. That if our ancestors could make it through times that were much worse than this, that we're gonna figure out a way through. And so I feel like I'm finding that strength, and it's very alarming. And I am heartened by the way that the Jewish community is coming together and strengthening. I'm heartened by the way that our community stands together, and I'm hopeful that the tides are going to turn. So that's what I'm holding.
Thank you, my friend. Michelle.
Larry Bacow once gave a brilliant talk here, at Temple Emmanuel, where I think he may have titled it this, but the main point was, I am outraged. And that often what you hear at not only universities, but in many places are people responding with, I am outraged. And I'm thinking his words are rattling around in my head right now because I am outraged. I am outraged by what I see on college campuses. I am outraged by by the idea that someone at our public libraries thought that the display that's going up now was the right display for our time. I'm outraged, and I am trying very hard to hear Larry Bachow's words that when we are outraged, we ought to pull back a bit and ask what's behind the outrage and try to work constructively rather than just from our emotions.
Wes, how are you doing?
So I'm doing terrible. I have a pit in my stomach. I'll give you one conversation that kind of takes us in. I feel very much like this is the 1930s in Germany. I feel that in my bones that this is the 1930s in Germany. And last night, after the lecture that Alana Stein-Hain gave, I was talking to a member who doesn't come around all that often, but he comes around occasionally. And I said to him, how are you doing? Terrible. I said, he asked me how I was doing. I said, I'm really terrible. I feel like it's the 1930s in Germany. And I said to him, what do you think about that analogy? And he said, I think about that all the time. I know a lot about Germany, pre-Hitler and Hitler. And I don't think we're in the 30s. I think we're 1928, 1929 Germany. I think this is brown shirts. And I didn't find that all that consoling. But the granularity of it, that he had thought about this and that we're in the brown shirt phase, where there are colleges where there aren't even any Jews, and they're anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, and it's all over the place, and it's violent, and they're breaking windows. I thought, wow, it's so, okay, so it's not 32, it's not Hitler, but it's 28, 29, it's brown shirts. And I have that in my stomach all the time. So here's what I wanted to do today. I think the five of us are all in this kind of a heavy place. Lisa, thank you for this. You're more hopeful than perhaps some of the others of us are, certainly more than I am. The question I want to wrestle with is a simple, single question. How do we change the human mind? How do we change the human mind? And I want to kind of frame it, which I'll do in a minute, share a conversation we had at Pesach services on day 7. And then I want to look at a couple of different texts for insight about what it teaches us about how to change our own minds and how to change the minds of our fellow citizens with whom we share a society. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
V'areb na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu ובפי עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה, ברוך אתה אדוני המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
So I want to, just as the frame, the textual biblical frame, the Passover readings and the Passover Exodus story that we just marked on Pesach gives us two salient examples of mind changing. The first is that, of course, Pharaoh would not let the people go, would not let the people go, would not let the people go. And then with the 10th plague, go, and go now, and go immediately. And it's not only Pharaoh, it's all of his advisors, Think about a committee of 12 or whatever it is, and they all say, go, go, go. We don't have alignment. We have unanimity. Go now, right? So you have a whole, imagine a board of directors or a board of trustees, and they just go now. They just change their mind immediately. And then all the people, imagine the whole congregation, yes, that new direction, a major change in direction, do it now. That's the 10th plague and aftermath. That's the end of Bo. And then the beginning of Bashalach, that same board of directors, that same group of courtiers, that same Pharaoh say, whoa, Jack, what did we just do? Why did we do that? And then they all change their mind at the same time again. Go get the best fighters, get the best horses, get the best chariots. Let's go and get our slaves back. It's kind of a framing question that I had asked the congregation on the seventh day of Pesach was, why did Pharaoh change his mind and his courtiers change their mind, and when have you ever changed your mind? And I just want to introduce the Torah of our congregation. There were kind of three salient examples of, and the question was not changing your mind on should you have Thai or Italian, or not changing your mind on should your reservation be at 7:30 or 8, but when have you changed your mind on a matter of deep principle? And our congregation on the seventh day of Pesach and the Rabbi Samuel Chil Sanctuary offered up three examples. I was always against gay inclusion. Just not, And then, whoa, it turns out my own child, my own loved one is gay or lesbian or LGBTQ. And I realized, oh my God, I was a schmo. And I realized, of course, they have to be included. But it was a personal relationship that opened their eyes. Second was, trans, not my issue. Not my issue. And then my 14-year-old grandchild is transitioning. Now it's really my issue. And now I really understand that empathy and humanity and love and decency must be brought. And now I am a huge trans advocate because of my grandchild. And the third, this feels so quaint. This just feels so old-fashioned. I just wish, I pray that we could live in a world like this, which is egalitarianism. I didn't used to be egalitarian when it first came up. It's only men who should be on the bima and men who taking the honors instead of reading the Torah. And then my daughter read from the Torah, and then my wife wanted to read from the Torah, and then my granddaughters wanted to read from the Torah, and now I can't even remember why I was against women's inclusion. But again, in all three cases, it was I had loved ones who were LGBTQ, I had loved ones who were transitioning, I had women in my life who wanted an equal part. It was all personal relationships. And the question that left me thinking with was, nobody cited an idea that they read or encountered. Nobody said, I always thought one way, and then somebody sent me a podcast, and oh my God, I was wrong. Or I always thought one way, and then somebody said, oh, here's an op-ed from the Journal or from the Times or from the Post or from some other article that I don't usually read, and all of a sudden, oh my God, I read that article, and now I've changed my way. Or nobody said, I heard a lecture, and it changed my thinking. Nobody said an idea changed their thinking. And so I wanted to think about, what do our sources say about what is it that changes the human mind? What I want to do today is look at two sources. One is Jeremiah 20. And I want to read this to you and talk about what it says to our time. And then the other is a teaching from the tractate Gittin about how you change human relationships and human minds. But here's the context for Jeremiah. Jeremiah is prophesying before 586. That is, say, in 597, before the Common Era. And he says to the people of Judah, hey, it's bad, it's going to get worse, and we are going to be exiled. We're going to be going to Babylonia, and they're going to destroy our temple, and they're going to exile everybody. And he says this, don't think we're going to get to keep our land, we are going to get exiled, and we're going to get defeated. And absolutely nobody hears him. And nobody can hear him, and he's miserable. He's got truth, capital T. Every word that he says is true, T-R-U-E, capital T, true. Everything he says pans out. Nobody can hear him. It feels like the truth is impotent. It feels like the truth is ineffective. It feels like the truth is completely beside the point. He offers the truth, and nobody says, oh my God, let's react to that. They ignore it, and he feels miserable. By the way, Micha points this out, that once they are exiled, later on he will say, okay, we're not always going to be in exile. We're going to be going back to the land of Israel. They can't hear him then either. In both cases, when they're home and he predicts exile, it's true, and he's ignored. When they're in exile, he says, we're going to go back home. They can't hear him, even though it's true. So I want to just read a little bit of this, and I want to ask you, what comes up for you when you hear the impotence of truth, the ineffectiveness of truth, the irrelevance of truth from the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 20. For thus said the Lord, I am going to deliver you and all your friends over to terror. They will fall by the sword of their enemies while you look on. I will deliver all Judah into the hands of the king of Babylon. He will exile them to Babylon or put them to the sword. And I will deliver all the wealth, all the riches, all the prized possessions of the city. I will also deliver all the treasures of the kings of Judah into the hands of their enemies. They shall seize them as plunder and carry them off to Babylon. Okay? And then he writes, Jeremiah continues, every time I speak, I must cry out, must shout, lawlessness and rapine, for the word of the Lord causes me constant disgrace and contempt. I thought I will not mention God. No more will I speak in God's name, but God's word was like a raging fire in my heart, shut up in my bones. I could not hold it in. I was helpless. I heard the whispers of the crowd, terror all around. Inform, let us inform against him. And then he ends up by saying, accursed be the day that I was born. Let not the day be blessed when my mother bore me. Accursed be the man who brought my father the news and said, a boy is born to you, and gave him such joy. Let that man become like the cities which the Lord overthrew without relenting. Let him hear shrieks in the morning and battle shouts at noontide, because he did not kill me before my birth, so that my mother might be my grave, and her womb big with me for all time. Why did I ever issue from the womb to see misery and woe, to spend all my days in shame? So Jeremiah 20, he has the truth. It's urgent. He's right. He tells the truth. He's ignored. And then you ask him, how are you doing, Jeremiah? And his answer is, I wish I wasn't even born. So, dear colleagues, I know it's a very bold brew, very tough stuff, but what comes up for you when you read Jeremiah 20 about the inefficacy of truth?
Well, I was thinking about this in terms of social media, because your thesis, which I think is really right, is that what changes people's minds is personal. But then what also seems to change a lot of people's minds is what they read. It's called X now, not TikTok or whatever. But what they read on social media, it's not. It's not personal. It's misinformation that people take as truth. And I think that in a certain way that has changed a lot of the ways that people interact with the world.
So Dan, you and I are both probably too old to get that. We're both too old to get that.
Wait a minute,
It's not our vibe. We're like an immigrant to that world. But I'm wondering if all those social media platforms are about content, or are they about the echo chamber you're in, about the community that you're in, that you're watching it with, that everybody is in their echo chamber, etc. But and that's what's persuasive, that their friends are in that same universe. Michelle, what comes up for you with chapter 20 of Jeremiah?
So I want to lift up our eyes to the heavens here, because I think there are two ways to read this text. Of course, the way that you have proposed it to us, this is clear proof that the truth doesn't matter, that it's all experiential, and minds can't be changed by the truth, because we see it. We see that happen in our text. And that certainly is descriptive, right? But I think we would make a mistake to say that that's prescriptive, or what the text is trying to say to us. To me, there's a second read here, which is that although it is 100% descriptive of human nature, that truth is not always what is going to win the day. The prescription is that we're still reading Jeremiah today, that ultimately Jeremiah is a bringer of truth, a stander for light, even when he feels like he'd rather die than have to do that, and that today we continue to read and engage with that truth and declare that there is a truth. And for me, that is really brought up very powerfully. This morning, Danny Gordis published one of his Israel from the Inside pieces, in which he brought up a letter that Yotam Berger had written, and there's just one piece in that I think amplifies this, and it's when we speak about the idea of that what's at stake today is not just anti-Zionism or trouble on our campuses, but actually what's at stake is an idea and an ideal, and it's a Jewish ideal about truth. And he writes, those who hold this position really no longer believe in the existence of truth or the existence of facts. And I think Jeremiah is actually our testimony as a Jewish people, and all of our prophets is our testimony that regardless of whether it's heard and regardless of whether it's compelling in its own moment, there is a truth, and that truth matters.
Love that. Love there being a truth. But can I just double click on your comment for a second? Because it is not just Jeremiah chapter 20 who is ignored, but to your point and your framing, it's all the biblical prophets who are ignored and spurned. So what do you make of the fact that, other than Jonah, which we know is a satire, it's like the prophet is not really a prophet. All the real prophets who are not as satirical, not one of them was ever heard in their own time. We read them for Shabbos morning, and bar and bat mitzvahs break their teeth on them, and we, read them or engage them in the Haftorah slot, but they were never actually heard in their own time. That's kind of sobering. What does that say to you about now?
To me, that picks up on Eliza's lovely thank you for bringing in the idea of chizuk, right? When we encounter our moment and we feel like the truth is ending up in a vacuum somewhere, just being sucked out of the air, that we can be strengthened with the knowledge that we're not alone.
I think there's an important question about objective truth and personal truth that we need to have a distinction here, because a lot of what's happening on college campuses is not about objective truth. It's about identifying with personal truth. And that distinction, I think, has the power to get us out of this bind, because when I watch videos of the protests, no one is listening. No one is listening to each other. There's no dialogue. There's no openness, no curiosity. Everybody has their positions and they're holding them. And I think the weakness of the prophets is that they had a truth that they knew to be objective, and they weren't able to engage on the subjective reality of people's lived experience and engage in a way that people could hear them. And
They couldn't talk to and listen to. Right.
And I think that's a place that we are now, that when we think about changing minds, and the whole thing with the display at the library, like, how do we engage with that? How do we think about this exhibit that's deeply offensive that's going up? Do we go out and we just rail and this is our thing? We hold up signs and we're like, you are wrong and our truth is the right truth and look at what happened to us and look at all this, and that just continues this I'm not hearing. Do we try to engage in dialogue? Do we try to listen? Do we try to hear a subjective truth? And if we can hear a subjective truth, will that enable us to then talk about objective reality in a different way? We haven't yet been able to do that, but I think that's a real importance. And I think part of the depression that we see here, Jeremiah, why was I born? I shouldn't have been here.
Right.
Is because he fails. He's never heard. Nobody gets his truth.
Yeah. So can I talk about that for a second? Can we just convert this Talmud class into therapy for a minute? I want to talk about Jeremiah's depression and my own here. We had dinner on the 7th night of Pesach. It was Shira and me and our son Sam, who was in from Brooklyn, and our dearest, longest friends. And it was the 7th day of Pesach, and it was, it was home, and there was a glass of wine, and it was unhurried time, and I didn't have to posture. And one of, my friends said, "Tell us how you really are. How are you really?" So I said, "Here's how I am really. Here's my truth, that October 7th and October 8th and October 9th was a paradigm changer for me, because I realized on those days that eliminationist Jew hatred, Nazi-level hatred, exists in the neighbors next door. That faculty at Harvard, that students at Harvard, and that faculty at all these schools, and that students at all these schools don't just what they want is dead Jews. Because even on October 7th, 8th, and 9th, they were deeply good. In fact, explicitly celebrated and have never condemned, and even more now celebrated, all the murder that Hamas did on October 7th. They never condemned it. Like on October 7th, the 35 organizations from Harvard said this is all on Israel. Not one person said, not one in 30 said, this is a tragedy. Our hearts are broken and we're with you. None of that. But rather, F you, Israel. And that was, and the faculty at Harvard that wouldn't condemn, and the students at Harvard that wouldn't condemn. And now we know it's across the world, across the country and around the world. So it feels to me like there are Nazis next door. And that is what I've been living with. And here's why I make this into therapy and depression. I'm with my wife, son, and best friends, and there was nowhere to go with that. And we were in a sinkhole. And I finally understood Jeremiah in a way like, oh man, this is just, I wish I didn't feel this, and I wish I didn't have to articulate it. But this truth that there are Nazis next door in 2024, there are Nazis on the faculty of all these schools. There are Nazis in the student body of all these schools. There are people who want a second final solution because there's 7 million Israeli Jews and they don't want Jews in Israel. That truth is burning in my bones, and I wish I didn't feel it, but I do, and I wish I didn't have to articulate it, but I do. And then nobody wants to hear it, and it's just super depressing. So I don't really know where to go with that.
Can I say, yeah, sorry. First of all, thank you, Wes, for expressing your deep feelings about this. In some way, we all share your pain. I want to go back a little bit to the original question of the class as you presented it. I think we are talking about two different things here. One is what's going on in college campuses and what's going on, with a lot of citizens about not listening to the real facts, okay, as Alisa expressed it, and that the truth doesn't matter, all right? But if we compare that with your original question, which is, can we change the way we think, and is it only done through relationship? I see a huge, how is what we say in that song that we sing together, abyss, huge abyss there, because we are not able even to create a relationship with these people. So if we are not able to, if the only way of changing somebody's mind is through relationship, how are we going to get to these people? It's impossible, impossible. And the other things that you brought up at the beginning, I think they are more personal. It's like you establish a relationship with a person and that person asks you, would you do that for me? And you are completely against it, but because the love you have for that person, you consider and you are changing that. But this is completely different. It's changing a whole culture and a snowball that keeps growing.
So I want to just, in the interest of time, I want to take a look at one last text. And Elisa, this links up with your observation that we now understand our medieval ancestors better than we ever did. So this is that there's a halacha category called mipnei darchei shalom. These are the nice things we do for Gentiles in order to promote peace. And growing up and living all of my life until October 7th in a pre-October 7th world, I was always embarrassed by this category because it suggested that we do nice things for Gentiles strategically with an agenda. We'll do these nice things for Gentiles so that they'll like us. And I was like, that's horrible. Why can't we just do nice things for Gentiles because they're humans and we're neighbors and their kids and our kids are on the same Little League team and their kids and our kids go to the same school and we believe in the dignity of all human beings. Why do we have to have an agenda? And now, it happens to be one of the teachings we read in Daily Minyan from time to time. This lands on me so differently than it ever has. So I want to read this and ask you what comes up for you now, okay? The rabbis taught, one supports the poor of the Gentiles as one does the poor of Israel. One visits the sick among the Gentiles as one does the sick in Israel. One mourns and buries the dead of the Gentiles as one does the dead of Israel. One comforts the mourners among the Gentiles, as one does those in Israel, mipnei darchei shalom, for the sake of peace. How does this teaching land on you now?
I have to say something because, since obviously the passing of my mother, I've been coming more often to Shacharit. And when you lead services, you know that you don't want to do always the same thing. So a few times I chose this text to read it, and I got some backlash from some members who said, please don't do that again. It's an embarrassing text.
It's an embarrassing text.
Yes.
Except for now, it's so relevant.
My own personal experience, to me, there's nothing against my own beliefs.
I wanted to chime in as well, Wes, when you were sharing about your deep pain and depression around the pain and anguish of realizing that there are neighbors who want to kill us, that are neighbors that are out to get us, and there's nowhere you can go with that.
Right,
truth.
they're good with the 1,200 dead on October 7th. They're good with it.
Totally. And I think that one of the pieces I don't know that we've done a good job. I think actually it's fair to say we have not done a good job as hearing the anguish of innocent Gazans who are watching their family members be killed and starved and moved around. And we, in our deep pain and you can't argue, we were attacked, like we did not seek this out. But in our deep pain, I don't think we've done a good enough job hearing that pain and hearing the brokenness that exists. And what's interesting to me about this text is it doesn't say, when your neighbor's kid wants an internship with a good firm, you give them an internship because of Darchei Shalom. And when you meet a politician, that you have them over for dinner because of Darchei Shalom. And when you there's nothing about the world of status, of reputation, of success. This is all about broken moments. That when someone is broken and someone is in pain and someone is in need, we are present and we are agents of love, and we do that. And I think Darchei Shalom, if you read it according to the Slonim Rebbe, Shalom is the fullness of all of the complexity that exists in life. And for me, this feels like a real teaching because we, in the moment of comforting someone in their grief, can hold complexity. We can hold complexity about somebody who had their great moments and had their challenging moments. We can hold complexity about somebody who's suffering from financial stress that was caused by poor decision making. We can hold complexity in all of these different moments, and still we show up because we are people that care about the heart, and we can hear that truth.
And Elise, just to follow up, do you think, this text suggests, right, I think it actually flows directly from it. It's pshat, not drash, that if we do these nice things for Gentiles, we show up in their moments, that they'll like us, right? That's why we do it, mipnei darchei shalom, that and in a medieval world, instead of persecuting us, massacring us, killing us, expelling us, mipnei darchei shalom, we'll have peace with our Gentile neighbors. And it was so not an American reality pre-October 7th. Again, I was always ashamed of this text. I never liked it when it was read in our morning service here. But now it does feel like this text is inviting us to ask the question that our medieval ancestors did, which is, how do we build decent relationships with Gentiles who might well hate us?
But it doesn't achieve that. I just want to be clear. It doesn't say they're going to like us. Mipnei darchei shalom is very clear for the sake of peace because you are embarking on that path. But I don't necessarily get an expectation that this is going to have an effect. And I hate to be depressing about it. In general, I try to be very optimistic. But I think it's important to say, Mipnei darchei shalom, that we are rodef shalom. We are always seeking out peace. We are always putting ourselves on the path of righteousness, not because of an outcome, but because it's the right thing to do. And I just think that's important because you can't create an outcome. You can only create your behavior.
One thing I want to say is that I don't like in general when we do generalizations, all right? In the same way that we hate when people say that we, all the Jews, are pro-genocide, all right? We shouldn't be saying that everybody next door is an anti-Semite.
I didn't say everybody next door.
But, well...
I didn't say everybody next door. I'm saying the people who would not condemn the death of October 7th are Nazis. I stand by that. And that's not everybody, fortunately. But there are a ton of people who are deeply good with that. and
Yeah, and
and
ton
the
of people who are
right.
against it, and ton of people who, at least to me, in personal level, people who are not Jewish, who offer the support all the time.
Yes,
I
and we
think
welcome that.
on the other hand, it's the also the question of the silent majority. You know, there are probably many hundreds of people who felt the pain, but they don't come out and say anything, and so that silence creates a sense of because they don't say anything, it's as though they're condoning it when in fact they didn't.
And all, by the way, and all the spoken energy, like all the energy of public gatherings, as long as I can remember, is against Israel. Yes. And it's against Israel. It's against our right to wage a war. No one sees that Hamas started the war, and no one sees that Hamas embeds itself in civilian centers, leaving Israel with the choice of either not defending its citizens or defending its citizens by going after Hamas, which, because Hamas embeds itself in civilian centers, means we kill civilians. And everybody blames us, and nobody blames Hamas. So if there's support out there of decent neighbors, I haven't heard it. What I've heard is a lot of anti-Israel animus. Michelle, what do you do with Ner Dachei Shalom?
I want to amplify Elias's point. We actually do have neighbors, some of whom showed up with, big baskets for us post. So now that is not to say by any measure.
Right. I didn't say everybody.
No,
and I never said everybody. I
Right.
just said that there are some neighbors next door who are good with Jewish death.
Yes.
That was paradigm changing.
Yes, and they are the loudest.
And I haven't recovered
right?
from that.
The
And
ones
they're
who
the
are
loudest.
deeply good are
Loudest.
the loudest.
And they're on all these campuses.
Yeah, and so to me, I think the temptation of saying, because ideas don't seem to change minds, and because we've brought the proof texts of, back in Egypt with Pharaoh, the ideas don't change the minds at all. It's a total failure. And because with Jeremiah, he has all these great ideas and they don't change minds, the temptation is therefore to say that the ideas don't matter. And I think actually now is the time to double down on more ideas and more clarity of our ideas. I think we, as an American people, have deeply failed when we have embraced the idea that everyone's truth is equally valid. I think we have lost our way as an American people, as we have pulled ourselves into various echo chambers. There was this picture of these frat boys on a campus in somewhere in the American college campus landscape. What were they doing? They were putting back up the American flag. Like what?
Chapel Hill.
Yeah, and we lost a grounding, a commitment together that we stand behind the American flag, that there is such a thing as shared American ideals or shared ideals of the world that we come to because we are part of a nation together. And I think actually now's the time to double down on ideas.
So, guys, let me just end with a question. We began when I asked you, "How are you?" and everybody but Elisa was down. What can you do? What can you do that changes the tone of your emotional energy, and that brings you positive energy and feeling of that you're building something helpful, or you're participating in the restoration of a better world? We always, you guys always sing, Olam Chesed Yibana, a world of kindness we will build. What do you do now in this world that we actually are living in that helps you build the world of kindness that we would all
Well,
love?
for me, it's simple. It's coming here every day. It's engaging in Torah every day. It's engaging with Jewish learning every day. V'chol netivotei shalom. That actually helps me every day. When I see the B'nai Mitzvah shining, when I see people davening and connecting, that actually is very helpful for me.
So Dan, thank you for that, and I'll just say ditto to that. But I have a question, and it's my answer too. But is that your answer, my answer, the same answer? Great, but is that enough? Because it feels like if all we do is help our B'nai Mitzvah shine, and if all we do is to paraphrase Shai Held, make middle-class people feel better about their world. If we don't engage the hate of the campuses and all that other stuff, are we doing enough? Dan, how would you answer that question? Are we doing enough?
Well, I think your question was what helps me personally, and,
Yeah.
and the answer is, yeah, I probably not. I'm not a person that's going to go out to rallies and put out pronouncements on various social media. It's not who I am, and I don't know that there's anything that I can do. I mean, I know that will actually be helpful, beyond my own small, I say the word echo chambers come up a lot today. So I just don't know. I don't have
So
an
I
answer.
want to double click. Is that a good
Yes.
expression? I want to double click on Dan. On the personal level, I feel exactly as Dan is feeling. I think that after October 7, the American Jewish community has come together in ways that I haven't seen in 25 years. There is a togetherness that I haven't seen before. I see a lot of people posting in social media, people who I consider that were not particularly engaged Jews, standing up for Israel, standing up for the Jewish people, which is refreshing and it's nice. And I get comfort coming here to the Daily Minyan and talking among people that we share the same values. For the outside world, and answering your question, I don't think that has a big effect on the outside world. The outside world, what it needs, it's changing minds through relationship. And we need to do more with that. We need to invite people who disagree with us here to have open conversations, talk about facts, talk about feelings, and do more of that.
Aliza. Michelle.
So I had a really beautiful conversation yesterday. I shared a couple weeks ago that Maliar's family, the translator who worked with us from Afghanistan, who's actually living with a Temple Emmanuel family and has been for years, his family just came and we are mobilizing to support them. So I was calling him to just check in and to find out about their needs so that we can update the page for volunteers to support them. And Maliar said to me, Rabbi Liza, I just want to tell you how meaningful it is and how touched I am that in the moment of your great pain, when your people are feeling so much challenge from the world, that you are choosing to spend your time helping me and my family. It means so much for me, and I want you to know that the Jewish people saved me, that because I have my Jewish family, I was able to come here and I was able to build a life here, and now my family is, and I don't take that for granted. And at the Passover Seder, I was reading the Haggadah, and it felt like my story too. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping. That, to me, feels like what we need. We need to focus on the places where we have an impact and where there are neighbors who see us and who get us and where we can achieve Darchei Shalom. And the rest is noise. And there's been noise throughout our history. We've always experienced noise, and we are a people that survives and thrives despite it all. And so I think we got to tune into that. And if you'd like to volunteer, we are welcoming volunteers. This is an incredible family who would love to see you. And I know that your interaction and engagement with this family will be uplifting for you as well.
I just feel like Jeremiah in a bad way, because I hear what you're saying and I love it, and I love you, and I love your energy, and I love the positivity, and I love the hope, and Lord knows it's not coming from me. And you know what I was thinking the entire time we were talking? The Chicago convention this summer, and how it's going to be a shit show like it was in 1968, and how there's going to be massive protests, and the Democratic convention in Chicago is going to be a shit show. It's going to be like 68 but worse. But this time it's not about Vietnam. This time it's about the Jewish state, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, and Joe Biden, and protest him, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm thinking, does that deal with that?
Okay, but there's not a plan that you have outlined here, that we have outlined here, that solves that. We don't have the capacity to solve that. And the reality is we have the capacity to direct our energy towards positivity and towards change and towards helping. And look, if you have a way of dealing with that, I think that's great. I think if there's a way that you can direct your energy towards working with that intensity that's on the horizon, totally anything that we can do to help our sense of optimism, to help our sense of hope, to connect us to strength, we should do that. I just know that we have this opportunity right here, right now, that God threw in our lap, that we plan to do this way before October 7th, and here it is. I think that's meaningful.
Yes,
Correct.
and, right? Yes, and, because, of course, the relationships matter, and that story is a shining example of how we can build real connections. And, right, there is a deep paradigm shift and change of faith in the world and in our neighbors who didn't show up for us, who haven't shown up with us, even some of those who we have some of those deep relationships with. And there is a deep sense of abandonment that the Jewish people feel. And so I think one of the salient learnings to emerge here is that we haven't yet figured out the playbook for this moment. But as Jeremiah and all the prophets continued to echo out their message, even in a world that wasn't yet ready to hear it, that's incumbent upon all of us today too, to lift our voices, to not get dispirited or overwhelmed and feel like all we can do is just come here in this moment, but to seek out and search for ways to speak truth into our world.
Yeah. So I'll just end by sharing something that's very countercultural for me, and not me. I mean, you guys know me. I wake up here and sleep here, and I live here in the Gann Chapel. I am going to try to take this opportunity. It's May. We have these exhibits in the Newton Public Library. I'm going to see the other exhibit, which is not going to be pleasant or fun. I'm going to force myself to see that exhibit. I'm going to force myself to go to interfaith dialogue. I'm going to force myself to leave Shachris Mincha Maariv in the Gann Chapel, which is my favorite place in the entire world. And I'm going to try to put myself out there to build relationships with our neighbors. If we can't do it in Newton, heaven help us. And so I think this is a charged and fraught moment for the Newton community. It's a charged and fraught moment for Temple Emmanuel. I think, again, we're recording this on May 2nd. This big anti-Israel and anti-Semitic exhibit is at the Newton Public Library. And I am personally, and everybody votes their own conscience, and there's no one right answer. I can tell you I am resisting. I am trying to transcend my default response of rejecting and rallying and being angry, et cetera, et cetera. I'm actually going to force myself to go to that exhibit with eyes open to learn another point of view, and then to listen to some lectures, and maybe the public library exhibits in May, exhibits plural, because there's also an Israeli exhibit from Zev Hirshhorn, can create an opportunity for dialogue. Maybe Newton could lead the way in what a new move might look like. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.